Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Monday. It's Monday, November 4th, 2019. Time to get going again. Had a fun weekend away. I had President Trump follow me around for the weekend. He usually comes to my neighborhood and bothers us and plays golf in our neighborhood for the weekend and ruins things. So this weekend I thought we'd take a little time away and head up to New York City, you know, for some paste picante sauce or whatever it was that they didn't make up there. And as it turns out, the president just couldn't stay away from me, and he decided to follow me up there. This happens from time to time, and I don't know, so I guess we ruined New York's weekend. It was a nice one. It worked out pretty well. He got booed at the at the UFC fight, and then spent the I guess the late part of Saturday night and the rest of the weekend denying that there had been any boos. They were all cheers. Everything was fantastic. He's the most popular president in history. And to prove it, people came from all over the world by the tens of thousands and ran through the streets of New York City Sunday morning shouting how much they love Trump. And they said, I will run a mile for every ounce of love I have for the president today. And just, I don't know. I don't know if he knew that was what was going on or not. I made sure to be alongside the course so the television cameras could pick me up booing, just in case Trump was watching on television or came out of Trump Tower to watch the race. I didn't want him to miss out on the opportunity to be booed by the crowd once again. Great reminder, though, of the way we were. Tweeted around. I saw a Bill tweet this morning. A great reminder from, when did they do this? This was the Daily Show rolled this out, and was it something that they did in the last couple days or something? I guess to compare to how we did with the reporting on Trump flying up to New York. After all, there wasn't any event up there, I don't think, that he was attending except for this fight, the UFC fight, which is, what is it, like UFC number 247. I don't know if there was anything special about it, or if maybe there was a Russian fighter in it that Putin wanted him to check out. I don't know why he would go ahead and do it. I guess he thought, I assume that part of the reasoning was he thought he would get a good reception at from a UFC crowd. And he got an okay one. I mean, it wasn't resounding boos like it was at the ball game, but the fact that there were boos at all, I think, caught a lot of people by surprise. Bill was tweeting around the Daily Show's compilation. I should go and see if I can't pick it up here. And it's actually rather amazing. The reporting in 2009, the point of this compilation is about the Obamas going to New York for the weekend. All right, he says, yeah, the Daily Show released that video last week. But the Obamas went to New York City back in 2009 and got jumped all over. I recall that was the case, but mostly I forgot, you know, in the wake of all the terribleness going on now, exactly what it was like. But it really is striking. It should come as no surprise to you, of course, that the featured players in that are Fox News commentators, including Sean Hannity, who's really, like, dripping with sarcasm and making funny voices. Oh, they want to go to New York City and hold hands, and it cost $350,000. And, you know, at the time, I am sure that there was some criticism that felt warranted, perhaps, and I guess we had no idea at that point that we were going to eventually get such an abusive president like Trump, who would be spending the same amount of money that they blew on their New York weekend every week playing golf. And I'm going to play golf not only in Virginia, but I want to fly to Florida to play golf. I want to fly to Ireland to play golf. I want to fly to New Jersey to play golf. All over the place. And, in hindsight, it's just ridiculous, of course. But every network chimed in on that. There was clips from ABC, CBS, CNN. I saw, there are more networks than that. But those are the ones I definitely saw in my one eye on the phone scanning of it this morning. And, remarkable. I guess had they to do it over again, I suppose some of them would have done it differently. But Fox obviously keeping the same pressure on now and still pretending like they, never dealt with anything quite like the Obamas. And now, of course, Trump, he's used to this lifestyle, or they just lie and say he's paying for it. Trump sometimes says he's paying for it. He forgets from time to time. Oh, and I'm donating my salary and yada, yada. It doesn't cover it. Anyway, it's been, another one of those weekends. So I had a good time. No taxpayers that I know of paid for our trip. But, people who paid taxes did pay for our trip. So there is that. I guess you could call it that. We went on the taxpayer dime there. All right, let me answer the phone here for Greg and bring him in. Hey, good morning, Greg. How are you?
Hey, good morning. We're just fine.
Okay. Did you run a marathon this weekend?
What's that?
Oh, it was freezing. Did you run the marathon this weekend?
I didn't run a marathon.
No?
I didn't see any bears, but it hit below 32, and
Maybe so
winter's coming.
Okay. He's either asleep or perhaps the bear.
Well, first week of December or so in this part of the country, the bears start to go into torpor. They don't fully hibernate, but they get pretty sleepy. And so December 1st, my new bear-proof feeder will go out.
Okay. The new bear-proof feeder goes out then?
Yeah, I'm waiting
they'll
for
be
him
asleep.
to go in the den and get sleepy.
Okay.
I don't want him to, bear-proof means it's proof for about 10 minutes.
Oh, yeah, okay. All right, well, so it won't be tempting them out. They'll say, I could go knock over that feeder, but I am sleepy.
Yeah, so it's stainless steel, and the birds can still eat, and so everything's cool.
All right.
Of course, you have to put it up with a derrick, but that's fine.
Well, I saw a few in New York if you need to borrow any. Abby can work it.
Yeah, there's a skunk out in the back, so Abby's kind of upset about it.
Keep it there.
So you'll hear a little bit about her during the show today. So there's two big stories that I was following. Of course, we have the pundit roundup, and we were covering the fact that the GOP is actually admitting that the Democrats are winning the spin war on impeachment.
Hooray.
That's good. David Drucker is reporting in the Washington Examiner, impeachment spin win, Democrats killing GOP in testimony leak game. Representative Ted Lieu, a California Democrat, has been listening to witnesses behind closed doors, said somewhat sympathetically that his Republican colleagues are not holding back or hanging Trump out to dry. There's just no information for them to leak that would counter the Democrats' message of a president that's corrupt. There's no counter narrative. It'll be worse for the Republicans when their transcripts come out. And let me give you an example of how that might work.
All right.
This is a story being reported not in the American press, but in the Daily Mail over in England. All right, let me just read you the headline to give you an idea of what sorts of things might come out.
Okay, Parleo loves the Mail.
Right. Jared Kushner gave Saudi prince permission to arrest Jamal Khashoggi before he was killed. Turkey intercepted the call and used it to force Trump to leave Syria, report claims.
Oh, well,
it's kind of like explosive if it's true. Of course, it's if true.
Yeah, this has to be an if true.
New report claims more whistleblower, and see where we're going with this. This isn't, this is proof that happened. This is a story that whistleblowers are telling Congress this behind closed doors, and that's part of the hearings.
Oh.
And if that's true, the allegation, which is what we have to call it, will come out with the transcripts.
Oh, okay. So that might have been reported to Congress as well, huh?
New report claims more whistleblowers have come forward to Democrat-led House of Representatives with claims of wrongdoing by Trump officials. This report says one whistleblower is alleging that Jared Kushner, Trump's son-in-law, approved Saudi plans to arrest Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi. According to Spectator, Turkey intercepted the call between Kushner and Saudi Prince Mohammed bin Salman and then used it to gain leverage over Trump. Trump agreed to remove American troops from northern Syria after a phone call with Turkish President Recep Erdogan. Now, that's the story. Now, the report claims that investigators on the Democratic-led House Intelligence Committee are aware of these allegations and are planning to dig further into them while pursuing the impeachment inquiry over Trump's dealings with Ukraine.
Okay.
It claims the number of intelligence whistleblowers who are willing to give evidence to the impeachment committee is 7 in number. The three already known
One a day.
are the anonymous CIA officer, the original whistleblower,
Right.
Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman,
Yes.
Tim Morrison, who's the NSC's director for European and Russian affairs, and then the Khashoggi whistleblower is 4, and then there's 3 others, according to this story.
Okay.
So the point is not that, this proves that this actually happened. What this story is saying is that this is the kind of stuff that's being reported to the committee behind closed doors that the Republicans say is unpersuasive.
Well, okay. I'd love to know if that ever makes it into anything that gets disclosed by the committee. I will say.
Right. I mean, this is just reported this morning, but
Yeah.
I'm just, you want to use a theoretical about, well, what difference do impeachment hearings make? If it turns out that this is the kind of stuff, or a story like this, or a story that's this kind of explosive is being reported, then the Democrats have the juggling act of, do we report hearsay? How do we put this forward to the public? And I'm telling you this because I'm going, not because this proves that Trump is doomed, nothing like that, but I'm going back to the idea that the Democrats appear to be selectively leaking damaging information and the Republicans are leaking nothing.
Yes, of course.
That was the original claim by the Republicans in that story about how they're winning the spin war.
Right. And as it turns out, all of the it's not even a strategic thing. I guess we could take the win if it's real, but credit for it goes to the fact that there just isn't any information that helps him, and everything you learn about Trump dooms him.
Right.
Well,
but again, remember just the alleged incident with Khashoggi and Kushner, and then go back to that David Druckner piece in the Washington Examiner, which starts like this. House Democrats are crushing Republicans with the use of testimony to frame the impeachment of President Trump for American voters, weaponizing selective leaks from closed-door depositions to portray a commander-in-chief that abused his power. Think about that framing, and then go read this story, and you go, that's what they mean.
I guess so. I mean, it's interesting. There's so much spin involved, even in that. It's funny about that. Look at how the Democrats are framing things. Well, look how you're framing that. What you're describing is a prosecution of a case, and then the defense goes and gives their spin, and then the jury decides which one of these things do we believe, or what combination of the two. Interesting. But between that and the complaints about when is our president going to get due process, and there was no quid pro quo. They're leaning on all sorts of buzzwords that make people think of television crime dramas without stopping to think, this is actually the way it's supposed to work.
Well, as for the quid pro quo, of course, over the weekend, the big story from the Washington Post was Republicans mulling over the idea of admitting that there was a quid pro quo, but that it really doesn't matter. Sure. And because that's where all of this is going. Greg Sargent has a nice thing about it here, including a tweet from Trump. So here's where this is all going, says Sargent. I submit that Trump may ultimately demand that Republicans fully defend his pressure on Ukraine to investigate Biden in particular without any squeamish double talk about investigating corruption. Yes. There's already very clear signs that Trump and his advisors are testing the waters to see if this will fly with Republicans. First, here's Trump himself. Note how he says that if there was a quid pro quo, there would be nothing wrong with it. Here's the tweet. Trump says false stories are being reported that a few Republican senators are saying that President Trump may have done a quid pro quo, but it doesn't matter. There's nothing wrong with that. It's not an impeachable event. Maybe, but read the transcript. There is no quid pro quo. So there he is undercutting his own defense.
Yeah.
Then there's Kellyanne Poles, who was on Kellyanne Conway, who was on Fox over the weekend. And she says straight up, it's okay for a president to block military aid in order to coerce a foreign government to investigate his opponent.
Sure.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with it.
Right. And just like nothing wrong with breaking the Hatch
says,
Act.
is it a high crime and misdemeanor? I wouldn't think so.
Yeah.
Well, who asked you, actually?
Well, Fox, I guess.
Fox did, but I didn't.
Right. And I turned that off. I didn't turn it on, but...
Trump is obsessively tracking how Republicans are responding to the deepening Ukraine scandal. He's on the lookout for any signs of disloyalty. And this is from Politico. President Trump doesn't think House Democrats' impeachment inquiry should get any media coverage.
Yeah, stop it.
Meanwhile, he's ravenously consuming all the media coverage.
Right. Well, I mean, that's a fine theory. Don't cover it.
Right. Sargent goes on to say, more evidence will come out. This will make it impossible to deny Trump's corrupt use of military aid to extort Ukraine to smear Biden any longer. In the end, The loyalty test will be that Republicans must fully defend what Trump actually did. And the real question would be whether it becomes a party-wide GOP position as opposed to one held by some Republicans, that there was nothing wrong with a Republican president using military aid to pressure a foreign power to help rig a U.S. election again on his behalf because we do it all the time. He's right about we did it all the time because he did it in 2016.
Yes.
Except he wasn't president at the time, and that makes a big difference to people.
Well, okay. I mean, it's different, but it's not.
Well, it's
2016. Also a problem.
It's the same story, but 2016 was as a candidate and it's done, and 2020 is as president and it's coming.
Yes, that's true. Past tense, I'll admit to that much. Yeah, I mean, that was a crime too. And there's additional crimes using the levers of government to make the second one happen. But yeah, okay. I got you.
So we have all of that. And then just a reminder, Politico also has this lovely Your Guide to a Year of Trump Legal Landmines to remind you before we get to the Siena poll that's out this morning and the NBC Wall Street Journal polls that were out over the weekend telling different stories. Your Guide to a Year of Trump Legal Landmines. Court rulings could say Trump is illegally profiting from foreign governments, he must hand over financial records, and that lawmakers should see more Russia probe evidence. All of this is going to take place over the next year, probably not in time for impeachment, but in time for the 2020 election.
The second round of impeachment, if you ask me. Yes.
Yeah,
all right.
Exactly, and there's no reason why you can't do two rounds, but that's another story altogether. Politically, people say, no, you have to do one. Well, it depends what's out there.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, right. You would get an agreement with that. People who say, well, politically it'd be crazy to do more than one, and then he murders
politically
somebody.
It'd be crazy to ask Saudi Arabia to arrest Khashoggi knowing he's going to be murdered.
Yes, Byron York would say that would, of course, that would be crazy. You can't do that, and he totally didn't because look at how crazy it is. He's offering that defense now, which is a little awkward considering how crazy. Well,
that's okay because that's how it all went. He would. Trump would never ask for a good vote. Well, of course he did. It's just that there's nothing wrong with it.
I mean, it's funny. You think
it's fine that Jared did that. Who could know? That Khashoggi would be murdered.
Right.
And what's that got to do with Trump anyway?
I don't know why they asked for his permission for anything. I think probably the best angle of the story is, they asked permission from me, Jared Kushner. He's real proud of himself.
So you're saying Byron York is tweeting about this Khashoggi story?
Not the Khashoggi story. He is tweeting about the Ukraine story.
Ukraine story.
Yeah,
okay.
But I mean, I guess it might as well, pick your story. It doesn't matter. The defense is so awkward and dumb that it could be applied to anything and be equally ineffective. But the Ukraine story that he was tweeting about just was says, Trump knew people were listening. There's no chance. Why would he commit a crime consciously while people were listening?
ABC, abuse of power, betrayal, and corruption. I mean, It's all fairly simple. It's just a question of which aspect of that do you want to hone in on? Because Russia and Ukraine are the same story. 2016, 2020, interference with the election, you name it. It's the same thing, but it's a question of what do you think will persuade the public? And so that's what the Democrats have to deal with. And I'm not saying that every piece of hearsay, like the one that the Daily Mail is reporting, has much to do with it. But don't forget the British press is also reporting that William Barr went to London to request basically
to ride a pony.
Making up stories about how the Russia probe started in the first place. And according to the British press, the Brits were just shocked that he was asking for that kind of stuff because it's pretty obvious that Russia was behind all of this. So why are you looking at the Ukraine angle?
Yeah.
That Ukraine somehow was really responsible, not Russia. That is pure Russian propaganda. Why are you doing this? And it all has to do with Paul Manafort. They were actually, because who is it? Jason Leopold from BuzzFeed got more Mueller memos and such published on the Freedom of Information Act.
Big weekend.
And you look at it over the weekend, and it's like, okay, well, they were really trying to push this, and Manafort and Trump and Sean Hannity were all in discussion with how to push this sort of thing.
Hannity. Yeah.
So Hannity clearly is part of the campaign team.
And he's pushed the boundaries for a long time, of course.
Right, but again,
Massive,
you know,
amazing.
you can get easily sidetracked by a lot of this stuff. The central issue here is abuse of power, betrayal of the country to a foreign power, and corruption, because it's either to protect things that he's done, like in the Khashoggi story, or to protect things that he's done, like where did his money come from to save all his golf courses?
Yes.
When his son admitted it was all Russian money.
Right. His very super smart large adult sons.
Right. So, you know, again, it's a focus on what you want to do about it. And for that reason, we're going to discuss the Siena polls either now or after the break that came out in the New York Times this morning.
Okay.
But all of this is pre-impeachment public hearings. So when you're looking at where things stand with the public, you already have a situation where half the country, literally half the country, something like 50% of the country, want Trump impeached and removed already. And the opposition to him is hardening. Now, Nate Cohen points out in the New York Times that you have to look at the national polls quite differently than the Electoral College swing states. Nancy Pelosi has said the same things. You can win by 30 on the coast. It doesn't matter. You have to have an Electoral College win, and that's why she was so cautious with impeachment. But now that she's got the data, she's going for it 100% and going for a kill. And I think that the impeachment hearings, when public, certainly could prove to be quite effective. They have to be done properly. But that was the whole idea behind putting Adam Schiff, the prosecutor, in charge, and not Judiciary Committee, which didn't do a great job with people like Corey Lewandowski. And, of course, the makeup of the committees are quite different because Judiciary tends to attract the most partisan bomb throwers, the Jim Jordans. Yeah. That's the kind of committee it is. An Intelligence Committee doesn't always attract the intelligent people. I think Devin Nunes was on that one. But still Devin Nunes is on the Intelligence Committee is that's like a Department of Redundancy department.
Yeah. Well, the Intelligence Committee has for a long time been considered. It's one of those, well, prior to Nunes, one of those bipartisan cooperative committees like the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. They would couldn't really put partisanship aside, but they regarded the oversight of the intelligence community as such a serious charge that serious-minded people would, come together in bipartisan fashion from time to time, as long as they were, approving, bombing bad guys or whatever. They were very pro, covert action and anti-terrorism, and would occasionally violate all of our rights as Americans in order to, try and do that. But even that now is gone, which, I guess maybe in hindsight it's not an awful thing when it comes to domestic spying. But right now, if Nunes had destroyed that comity for productive ends with respect to our civil liberties, I guess I couldn't be quite so upset. But instead, of course, he's just making things worse and more partisan.
Well, all I can say is thank goodness for the activists, and thank goodness for the voters, and thank goodness for the 2018 elections. Because if you want to look at whether every vote matters, just look at 2018. And, of course, that's a good reminder for me to remind everybody we got some big elections coming up tomorrow.
Yes.
Including in your state.
Yes.
Where hopefully Democrats and independents who lean Democrats, which is the key to the 2020 election, will be on display, and we'll see how Virginia does, for example, and whether or not they can flip the House delegates in the Senate.
Well, Rachel says they can, so they better.
Well, we'll see what happens there.
Yeah, all right.
Meanwhile, before we get to Siena, which will be after the break, let's look at NBC Wall Street Journal poll on 2020 general election since we're 1 year out. Biden 50, Trump 41, Warren 50, Trump 42. 46% of voters are certain to vote against Trump, 34% are certain to vote for him, and 17% say they might vote either way, depending upon the nominee. Okay. Trump would have to basically win all of them in order to win re-election. The bottom line from these results, says Mark Murray, is pretty conservative when it comes to interpretation. Trump very well might survive impeachment due to his GOP base, but surviving the 2020 election might be harder. But the Siena poll from the New York Times today points out that, well, you got to be careful about all of this. So let's just jump into this. And before we do, let me set this up, okay? Let's say you have a poll that says, we'll pick Joe Biden, because he's the putative front runner at the moment. So let's say Joe Biden beats Trump by 10 and Elizabeth Warren beats Trump by 7. Okay.
All right.
And Trump wins by 1. Let's say you have another poll that says that Biden wins by 3. Yeah. And Warren loses by 1, and Warren wins by 1.
I think I follow this.
So which one is the more accurate poll?
Oh, I gotcha. What? I don't remember all the numbers. Yeah, all right, but I can see
the point of all
you mean.
That is that in both polls, Biden does about 3, maybe 4 points better than Warren.
Right. Okay.
You don't notice it, as Nate Silver points out on Twitter, when it's a big lead.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about a 3 or 4 point lead or a 1 or 2 point lead, all of a sudden you notice the difference between winning by 1 and losing by 1.
It's a larger percentage.
Even though it's the same margin between Biden and Warren.
Yes. Well, right. Well, the margins is okay. That's
okay.
Not the important
Or if
part
you have a poll that says candidate A wins by 10, and another poll says candidate B wins by 1, and it turns out candidate A wins by 1.
Yeah.
Right? Which is the more accurate poll? The one that showed candidate A winning?
Yeah.
Or the second poll, which showed it was a really close race and it could have gone either way? But that one had the other guy winning.
Yeah.
How could it be accurate? Well, actually, it showed a 1 or 2 point margin, and that was the good poll.
Right. Well, okay.
Not the one that the correct candidate won by 10 when he only won by 1. That's a bad poll.
Yes. All right, well, that's true. It's a weird way.
Think about that when we talk about CNN.
Can't figure it out until after it's all over, though. Okay, we'll be right back in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. Let's see, we were in the middle of the polls when we left off, but then of course I brought the conversation over the break back to Byron York and his tweet. I'll just lay it out clearly for you here, Greg, by just reading him the thing. York was saying about the Ukraine phone call. Trump's position is, I knew lots of people were listening, had no idea who some of them were, and I'm going to use that occasion to commit a crime, please. So that's apparently his morning piece for the Washington Examiner. The idea being, with Trump having knowledge of how many people were listening to the call, obviously he wouldn't commit a crime in full view or within earshot, I guess, of everyone who was on the phone call. And he's not listening to any of them, but he's being inundated by people's responses to how dumb is that? People are saying, for a guy was saying, how did the do not congratulate instruction go?
Byron York is basically saying, hey, Trump is a rational actor who's guilt-free defense. And it falls apart as soon as Trump opens his mouth because he's not a rational actor and he's not guilt-free.
And I keep thinking, you think you see somebody giving the ultimate answer to
I
that.
wouldn't do it. Therefore, he wouldn't do it.
Right. Now, I'm not so sure that you wouldn't do it, but, like to me, I said, well, the do not congratulate note on the call to
My brother-in-law
Putin.
couldn't have robbed the bank because I would never do it.
Right. That's not smart.
And he certainly wouldn't have told me he did it because who does that?
Right. But even when you give him
this Facebook post where he has pictures of him robbing the bank? Well,
there's 1,000 things like this. But even actual real life examples, like my thing, says do not congratulate on top of the note. Immediately he congratulates.
Right. This is not a transcript.
Right. This is not a transcript. This is a transcript.
Right.
And somebody else pointed out, he confessed to sexual assault to Billy Bush on television camera.
Right.
He does this all the time.
So the Siena polls.
Yes.
Despite low national approval ratings and the specter of impeachment, President Trump remains highly competitive in the battleground states likeliest to decide his reelection, according to a set of new surveys from the New York Times Upshot and Siena College. It's driving a lot of conversation this morning, so I want to go over them.
I see this.
How Trump fares among registered voters, for example. Okay. Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, Arizona, and North Carolina are the 6 states, each separately polled. Which one do you want to tackle?
Oh.
Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Florida, Arizona, North Carolina.
He's going to move to Florida.
All right, Florida.
Yes.
Biden +2 in Florida. Trump +1 over Sanders in Florida. And Trump +4 over Warren in Florida.
Oh,
Remember, if Trump is doing better against Warren by 3 or 4 points compared to Biden, it's hidden when he wins by 10 and she wins by 6. But if you're looking at a close race, Biden +2 and Warren -4, that 5 or 6 point difference shows up. So when you talk about electability, which is a vague thing that everybody except Joe Biden thinks is silly, this is why people talk about it.
I guess so. It's, I don't know. That's fascinating, too. I wouldn't have guessed that the Sanders position in that, too. But again, I guess we're still in...
Well, again,
margins
it's a
are pretty
year out.
close.
There's a lot to go. This isn't definitive as to how, but here's where things are positioned right now.
Look at it. It's a loss.
Okay. Now, let's look at Michigan.
All right.
Biden and Trump are even, according to this poll. Not what other polls say.
Like the
That's
trees.
what this poll says.
Yeah.
Sanders wins by 2 points. Michigan was a strong Sanders state, remember?
All right.
And Warren loses by 6.
All right. That's pretty significant sounding.
Let's take Pennsylvania, where Joe Biden is from.
True.
Biden wins by 3. Sanders wins by 1. Warren is even. And Wisconsin, Biden wins by 3. Sanders wins by 2. And Warren is even. So according to this, which is one of the reasons why I have a little trouble accepting at face value everything, according to this, the Democrats have an easier time winning Pennsylvania and Wisconsin than they do Michigan.
Okay.
I would think Wisconsin's a more difficult win for them than Michigan.
All right.
But we'll see. I mean, it's close. So that's really the point in all of this. What's interesting here, let's look at Arizona. Biden +5. According to this, Biden's doing better in Arizona than he is in Michigan or Pennsylvania.
Oh. Yeah, all right.
But it also says Arizona's, okay, forget about, again, the +1, -1, you win by 1, you lose by 1, which is, close polls can go either way. The point this is making is that Arizona's a swing state.
I guess so now.
And if Arizona's a swing state, put that on the map. Look at Arizona, look at Georgia, look at Texas.
It's been happening.
Wasserman points out. Don't just look at your traditional Iowa and Ohio. Forget about them. Look at Arizona, look at Georgia, and look at Texas. They're more likely to go Democratic than Ohio is.
All right. I mean, that doesn't... Yeah, I wouldn't have made that necessarily follow from Arizona, but the numbers say that they do.
The numbers say that they do. That's what the numbers are showing us.
That's why people get numbers.
So, again, this is registered voters.
I wouldn't have guessed it.
And it shows a close race. However,
yes,
a couple of things about this. When you go and delve into the numbers, and Nate Cohen did this for us, he points out that one of the differences between the Siena polls and some other polls, MU Law poll does this too, and MU Law poll shows Biden doing better in Wisconsin than this. But according to the Siena polls and Nate Cohen, they control for education. So they really get to tease out what kind of voters are doing which. For example, what different types of voters said. An Emerson poll, for example, doesn't allow for education. They don't correct for that, which is a mistake made in 2016 in the state level polls that should not be duplicated. So, for example, if you're white college, you, according to the 2016 polls, were Clinton +6.
Okay.
All right. Trump versus Biden, Biden's +10, so picks up some white college voters compared to 2016. Sanders is the same as Clinton, +6, and Warren is +7. So they're all competitive and doing quite well with white college voters.
Okay.
White non-college voters. This is Trump's strength here. In 2016, according to the polls, and this is upshot compilation of 7,000 battleground state respondents in pre-election polls at various places, not just New York Times, but also CBS, Pew, ABC, et cetera, et cetera. So white non-college voters went for Trump 26 points.
Huh. Okay.
Versus Warren, Trump is up 26 points.
Yeah.
Right? And Biden picks up a couple of points. Trump's only up 24, and Sanders is only up 24. So basically, white non-college voters are sticking with Trump. They're just as racist and sexist as they were in 2016. They're not going to vote for Warren.
Yeah.
They see her as another Hillary Clinton. I'm just saying.
Yeah,
that's what these numbers are telling us. But they're not real fond of Biden or Sanders either. So according to the polling, Nate Cohen says 2/3 of those who voted Democrat in 2018 are considering voting Trump or will stick with Trump in 2020. Mm-hmm. So all the 2018 gains aren't necessarily reproducible in 2020, according to this data. However, this is interesting, and it makes me scratch my head and think maybe they got some stuff wrong. Black voters.
Yes.
Clinton won them by 79 points. Biden wins them by 74. Sanders and Warren win them by 68, 69.
Okay.
All right. So there's not as much enthusiasm for the Democrats in 2020 as there was in 2016 amongst black voters.
All
according
right.
to this poll at this particular point in time. And
yeah.
yet everybody's engaged.
Okay.
Right? According to the other polls, this is the engagement with considering the election is something exciting to be looking forward to. It's up to 78% of the population and higher than a normal presidential year. In fact, right before the election in 2016, it's higher now, a year ahead of the next election.
Is that the case with the
so
black voters
I'm not
too?
sure about whether they're picking the black vote up right. If they are correct, that's one of the reasons why it would be a close race. Hispanic voters, Clinton plus 35 in 2016, Biden 34, maintains. Warren is only 24. Are Hispanic voters just inherently more conservative?
People have theorized that
right?
was the case.
Do they not want a woman to run?
Well,
I mean, these are the kinds of
they
questions
weren't as disturbed by it by
if you are
Clinton.
saying, I'm sorry we didn't have a woman in 2016, it's time for one in 2020.
Yeah.
I agree, but look at what the electorate is saying.
Yeah, I guess we got to figure out why they're.
And if you hate that question, you're going to hate, well, who's electable questions. But if you ignore it, you're ignoring these numbers.
Yeah. All right. Well, that is interesting. But
right? Other than Hispanic, black, white, college, white, non-college. Other. Clinton won 11 points in 2016. Biden
11?
keeps that at 10. Sanders at 14. And Warren at 3. There's data in this poll suggesting Warren isn't the best, strongest candidate at this moment. At this moment, okay? Does that mean that everything that we're positing as a possibility about being sexist and, if you wish, too far left, whatever.
Year away.
Is that what these numbers are telling us? Rachel Bittencofer says no.
Okay.
Don't interpret them that way. You will see interpretations that way because whenever you have numbers like this, it proves my point. I told you Biden was more electable. I told you America wasn't ready to go left. Actually, what Rachel Bittencofer says, what this is telling us is that Elizabeth Warren's name recognition isn't nearly as high as it is with the other two, Biden and Sanders. And data shows that. And so when her electability is in question, you can't really compare apples and oranges until her name recognition is as high as the other candidates.
That's a good point.
Well, the counter to that is, but if she's not well known, wouldn't she be generic Democrat?
I don't know. Maybe, but
I don't know, maybe. So
sitting in the middle
a lot of
between
questions here that are raised that don't have answers, but I'm just saying this is a head scratcher. If you want to step back and look at the big picture with these Siena polls, isn't that Democrats are doomed or that they're not doing as well as they should. It's that it's interesting data showing that, for example, Arizona really is a swing state, that the election's going to be close, there's not going to be a blowout, and that this is all baseline pre-public hearings on impeachment, which we started the first segment about.
Too. Yeah.
And if explosive information and things that are worth highlighting matter to the public, then the hearings will matter. And if you will, remember what I said, all you do is you take numbers and then you explain how it confirms what you already thought. Mm-hmm. I'm telling you, persuasion is important. It isn't just turnout. Look at these numbers.
Yes. And the fact
therefore
that there's
proves
a year to go is also, you have to let them go through the process to figure this
You do.
thing out.
I mean, there's so much more that's going to happen. Remember the list of legal questions that are come up, the hearings. So much is going to happen between now and a year from now. You can't look at these numbers as predictive. But if you're looking at how the impeachment issue is playing for right now, what it's done is it has established a ceiling for Trump. He can't get over 45%. But it hasn't established his floor. It can go lower. And at the same time highlights that he's got some, as the NBC Wall Street Journal poll shows, real issues in winning in 2020 absent a strong third-party candidate that can steal votes from the Democrats. So you're going to see a lot of, given that stuff in mind, you'll see plays to the white non-college base all the time because that's how, in his mind, Trump wins the Electoral College. You will see lots of, the impeachment stuff doesn't really matter, and we have the Byron York defense and others like it. We will see lots of disparagement of women running and plays to sexism and misogyny. You're going to see that because that's part of the Trump playbook. And you can see that, for example, in how upset Trump world was with the concept that Facebook was considering, or at least there'll be pressure on Facebook to consider withdrawing the political ads the way that Twitter did.
I see. Yes.
Now, Facebook makes a lot more money on theirs than Twitter does. Yeah. But on the other hand, Facebook is so central to the Trump re-election that even the rumors of such a thing got them really upset, and they started talking about it.
Yeah, I think they should continue. I hope that continues as a point of discussion. Keep them on there. Keep them unsettled. But, yeah, I guess there's no chance. I wouldn't bet on Facebook turning away billions of dollars, right. I imagine. So probably not in the cards.
Right. So going back to the Siena poll to finish up the segment here.
Okay.
As a result, Democrats appear to have made little progress in reclaiming the traditional advantage in the northern battleground states, despite the sweep there in 2018. Respondents in these states said they voted for Democratic congressional candidates by an average of 6 points, all but identical to their actual winning margins. Nearly two-thirds of the Trump voters said they voted for Democratic congressional candidates in 2018, say they'll back the president against all three named opponents. And these are Trump voters, but that means that they lose a third.
Yeah.
If you lose a third of your voters in a race that was decided by 10 votes, that's not great for you. Nonetheless, Mr. Biden holds the edge among both registered voters and likely voters, and even among those who cast a ballot in 2016. He has a lead of 55% to 22% among voters who say they supported Gary Johnson and Jill Stein, and among those who say they voted but left the 2016 presidential race blank. It comes on top of a slight shift, 2 points in Mr. Biden's favor, among those who say they voted for either Clinton or Trump. So Biden, in this poll, is the strongest candidate now. Yes, you can make all the arguments about how he's not really a strong candidate come next year, but that's what the numbers are telling us. And again, everybody who keeps saying Biden's going to fade has been wrong so far. Understandably, it's, but that's because a lot of stuff has to happen first, like losing Iowa, losing New Hampshire, losing Nevada, and then trying to hold on in South Carolina.
Yes.
But the flip side of that coin is that as long as his black voting base remains stronger than anybody else, including people like Pete Buttigieg, who has a terrible problem with attracting black voters, then Biden's going to continue to be strong.
Okay. Well, if you rack up a bunch of losses in a row, that will tend to change the way people think.
Well, again, if we're talking about electability, and that was the whole thing about the Siena poll.
You're not getting elected. What is
You're not getting elected if you can't win your races.
That's yeah. I think it's a pretty simple message to decode at that point.
But it's going to take until 4 months from now to see it. So for now, this is where things.
All right. Well, another wait and see situation.
Siena's a very good poll.
I
think it's worthwhile. I trust it far more than I do, let's say, Emerson. But on the other hand, there are also some very good polls that are showing a larger lead for Democrats, a 7-point generic ballot, and so on and so forth. So with all of that, Trump's approval numbers remain in the low 40s, 41, 42, according to 538 aggregate. And at the same time, in individual states, other numbers are quite different than what you get from the Siena polling. For example, in Michigan general election head-to-heads, Emerson says Sanders wins by 14, Biden by 12, and Warren by 8. Again, showing that's a 6-point difference between Sanders and Warren, a 4-point difference between Biden and Warren. So maybe it's all name recognition, maybe it's something else, but Warren truly is not doing as well in these numbers as Sanders and Biden, the male candidates.
All right, so then
even if Emerson is off by 10 points, take away 10 points, it's still the case that Sanders and Biden are doing better than Warren. And again, it gets obscured by the bigger numbers, as I said before, but I think that's sort of important. Now, the 2020 matchups in Fox News poll that came out over the weekend haven't budged at all. Biden 51-39 over Trump, Bernie Sanders 49-41 over Trump, Elizabeth Warren 46-41 over Trump. And again, the difference between the way Biden wins and the way Warren wins is small but significant. And when everybody's beating Trump, it's obscured. They threw in Hillary Clinton for some reason. I don't know why. She beats him 43-41, which is about what happened. And Pete Buttigieg is tied.
Yeah.
But Biden winning 51-39 and Sanders winning 49-41 and Warren winning 46-41. The point is Trump's numbers are stuck in the low 40s, right where his approval is, at 41. It's very hard to win an election when all you get is 41% of the vote.
Yeah.
So I'm not disheartened by Siena. Siena is perhaps worst case for Democrats, showing that's going to be closer than you would like if the election were held today. But we have a whole impeachment process coming and a whole lot of other stuff coming out, including over the time frame of a year from now to the election, Trump's taxes and other legal issues. So this doesn't bum me out. I was never expecting it to be a landslide unless there's more bombshells coming from the public testimony than we think.
Oh, that's coming.
And so that's the lay of land right at the moment. It still looks like, to me, Trump isn't the favorite, but it's going to be a competitive race. A competitive race doesn't mean that we're losing.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, like you said, it's pretty consistent across the board what Trump pulls. As you were saying it, I wondered whether it seemed to make sense, but only because we had already filled in the backstory of the question of whether or not Warren's polling performance had to do with some other factor or whether it was simply name recognition. I guess there were it seemed like there were far fewer undecided or other numbers that you'd have to account for in the matchups as between Biden and Trump and even Sanders and Trump. And even when in the Fox poll, as you mentioned, that Warren ultimately wins over Trump in the poll, the margin being different, there's a large number of people saying, geez, I don't know. And I think that feels to me like they must be saying, well, whether or not you're voting for Trump. And then the question of, well, who is this other person that they're talking about? I don't know. That one I don't know.
There's a lot of people that say that I'm not sure, it depends who the candidate is.
Yes, there's always that. And then and when they get to a named candidate, they say, I don't know that one. Right. So it seemed like it was coming out like, 51-49 thereabouts, or I don't remember what the Fox numbers was on Biden and Trump, but almost everyone was accounted for in that one, and there was a
51-39.
Okay. So yeah, even so, but it sounded. What was the margin? Were there more either no answer, I don't know, others in the Warren matchup there? It's what it sounded like to me, but.
Well, it'd have to be because it's 46-41.
Okay, yeah. So that's what I'm wondering if that is. To me, that jives
So
with
there's
the idea
13%
of we don't know who
there.
she is. Yeah.
Right.
But not that much more, I guess. But still, I thought that might be it.
And
By
11%
the way,
for Biden.
going back to the Siena poll, I'm wondering, can I have from curious reporters who love to go to diners, where I would love the story of the lonely, isolated feeling experienced by the non-college white Democratic voters. You know, I'm on 20. I'm outnumbered 3-1 among my peers. What's that like? That's a good story to me. I think that's interesting. I'm surrounded every day on the job by people who are, I think, idiots voting for this other guy, and it's so obvious, and I can't stand it anymore, but what am I going to do? I'm just curious. What's that like? Do they start thinking about going to college, or what?
Or what? Well,
Get a new job? Is that who's registering at the University of Phoenix at night? I don't know.
That I can't answer. But
I would like to know.
Feelings about this particular presidency run pretty deep, so it's hard to persuade. But the margins matter, and so when you're looking at close elections like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, 3-4 point swing one way or the other matters. Let me just finish up by giving you a Real Clear Politics picture I just sent you. You're seeing Skype today?
Yes.
So you can see the last picture.
They're back.
That
We're just off, I guess. They took the day off and didn't tell us.
Took the day off and didn't tell us. But we're back. Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination, where Biden is at 29, Warren 20, Sanders 17, Buttigieg 7. Everybody else is 4 or less. And what's interesting in looking at the graphs in this particular Real Clear Politics, green is Biden, brown is Warren. And you could see Biden has stayed steady. Sanders has stayed steady. He's in blue. Mm-hmm. And in brown, Warren made a surge, and now it's dropping back to where she was before. She had tied Biden in the national polls, and then what happens with frontrunners? You get increased scrutiny. Mm-hmm. Okay? And the thing to be scrutinized with Warren is that her Medicare for All, How Do We Pay for It plan came out, and it turns out it's going to cost trillions of dollars, and taxes are going to go up, although she says not on the middle class.
Yes.
It's a good, wonky, realistic view of how healthcare is paid for in this country, and it's a political loser.
Oh, dang it.
Because people don't want their taxes going up. And when you say only the middle class will be preserved, it's only going to be on the rich, people say, well, I don't believe that. That's a really hard sell.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, that has been promised before, and it rarely works. So maybe hers would, but
it's a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
But I said at the outset when Harris and Warren raised their hand about eliminating private health insurance in the first debate, it was a big political mistake, and I think it's going to come back to haunt them. And I think that's part of the reason why Warren has dropped back to where she was. She's second. She's leading Bernie, but she's
makes logical
behind
sense.
Biden.
I just can't believe so many people paid attention to that. But okay. A lot of people
healthcare
really
is one of
it.
those things like I didn't pay attention to anything else, but I paid attention to that.
Yeah, that would be one of them because it would be, everybody else.
That's what we call
it's
a
problem for you.
Shoot.
Yeah, it stays there. It doesn't go away.
It stays there. It doesn't go away. It's always sitting there on the kitchen table because you keep getting notices from all your healthcare companies.
Right.
Like you get 3, snail mail things a day about something or other. I mean, for example, I happen to be 65 and I'm now on Medicare. And this happens to be the enrollment period.
Yes.
But it's also the you can switch your plan if you want to period. I'm getting inundated with healthcare literature. Right? Yeah. And I think most seniors are. Just to give you an example. Mm-hmm. A senior, David.
Yes. Are any of the pieces persuasive?
I don't know. I don't always open them, but I know they're there. So what I'm saying is, once I enrolled in May when I turned 65.
Yeah.
And it turned out that when you do that, you then are still part of the enrollment period in September. It's only a couple of months later. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to switch. Once you've chosen your Medicare Part D and once you've chosen which Medicare supplemental you want to do in addition to regular Medicare, or if you've picked Medicare Advantage, whatever you've done, you don't have to change. You don't do anything and you stick with your insurance and nothing changes.
Yeah.
But every year at this time of year, and that will be true in November of next year when it's election season,
yes,
seniors are going to get inundated with healthcare stuff. It's on the table. It's literally on the kitchen table.
If that's where you keep your mail, yes.
Right? You get the mail, you throw it on the kitchen table, and then you read it, and then you throw it in the garbage. But it's a kitchen table issue, and it's big, and people do pay attention to what Warren is saying here, as well as what Bernie's saying on Medicare for all. And let's just say it's a hard sell.
Okay.
With the American people.
Well, I think the timing will be interesting. By the way, what that means is, if I understand it correctly, you pay them and they give you health insurance. That's a quid pro quo, and that will put that back in the news in November.
Yeah, but it's not with a foreign government.
True. Well, at least you think so. Who owns this insurance company?
I have to ask Joan about that.
What if the Chinese have bought your insurance company?
Yeah. Well, listen, if you get any information that suggests that Jared Kushner made suggestions about your future.
I have that.
Especially with Saudi Arabia.
Yes.
Be careful.
Yeah. Canceling my trip to Istanbul.
Maybe don't take that trip. Maybe don't take that call. Maybe don't take that meeting.
Right. Or at least,
I'm just saying.
Turkey. Turkey and Syria are out for me. Speaking of Turkey, it is November, and I don't know. I guess it makes a good place to end the segment as any. And very good. Okay, I don't know. I guess we're caught up on this one, and we're about to get our break alarm in about 2 seconds. Anyway.
Yeah. Just keep in mind that there was supposed to be a bunch of people from office management and budget testifying to Congress. None of them are going to show up. They're all Mulvaney people, and Trump has put the lid on any of his people talking to Congress. States ignoring him, security's ignoring him, national security's ignoring him, but OMB will not.
Yeah. Well, okay, those are the ideologues. Not a lot of holdovers.
That's correct. So it's the difference between the career people and the political people. So don't hear the news that, a bunch of people didn't show up. All of a sudden, now what he's doing is effective. No, It's the difference between asking the career people and the political people.
That's, I believe, is exactly it. So, okay, well summarized there as well. Okay, very good. Thanks. You needed a whole hour of the show, and now I have to do stuff too. Now I have your shoes to fill. Great.
Great, wonderful.
Okay, well, enjoy the day and the skunk and whatever else goes with it. Hope the skunk's gone now, and we'll talk to you again Wednesday.
See you then.
Okay, take care.
And we'll talk about Virginia election, which should have been the day before.
Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. And, all right, we've finally wrapped things up there. I guess, there is, of course, much else going on. By the way, the breaking-ish news over the last hour or so that I noticed, AP reporting that an Iranian official now says that the country, says Tehran, that's the capital, of course, is now operating 60 IR-6 centrifuges, which means nothing to me except centrifuges, of course, rings a bell. Are IR-6 bad ones? Well, we're meant to think so. That is twice as many as before, in violation of the nuclear deal, of course. I don't know whether we'll see Trump react to it all, but if he does, it'll be some gobbledygook about, see, I told you Obama's deal was terrible, but of course it would have, he'll say it wouldn't have limited them anyway. They would have done it in violation of Obama's nuclear deal just the same as mine. His base will believe that. Others will say your unilateral withdrawal from it is what freed Tehran to do it. But I just keep in mind this goes into my thread of, boy, you're really good at getting stuff done or whatever. Hashtag dotard. This is another one of those things that you promised you would be able to do that much better than Obama. And, of course, you're a brain-dead moron and you weren't able to do it at all. And, in fact, made things, allegedly twice as bad. So, okay, just sort of taking note of that and putting it in the news in front of you. And you can consider it from there. What else have we got here? All right. We'll dive into Pocket and into the Twitter feed from the weekend. Twitter, I think, was where most of the action happened for me. Being away for the weekend, only have one eye on the news and relying on those of you who populate my feed to curate the news for me. So let's see. Just kind of running down the Twitter feed here. A noted Reaction here from Sam Stein to one of Donald Trump's complaint tweets for this morning. Trump complaining the whistleblower gave false information and dealt with corrupt politician Schiff, which he didn't on either count, false information or dealing with Schiff. He must be brought forward to testify, and he very well may be in the end. Written answers not acceptable. Where is the second whistleblower? In fact, where's the seventh, if you believe the reports from the Daily Mail and elsewhere? He disappeared after I released the transcript, which he didn't. Does he even exist? Where is the informant? Con. I don't know. I guess he's saying this whole thing is a con job here. Sam Stein just pointing out, I guess what the backstory of this one is, the committees may or may not have direct live testimony given by the whistleblower. Again, just to clarify that thing, this is an interesting little back and forth here. It's a good spin game. The Republicans saying, look, this whole thing was predicated on the whistleblower report. So wouldn't you say that obviously the whistleblower is one of the key witnesses here? You've got to have the whistleblower testify, and therefore, in so doing, we would have to identify who is the whistleblower eventually. And Trump's interest in finding out who the whistleblower is of course, and it can't possibly extend beyond, I want to know the person so that I can see if I have dirt on that person or generate dirt on that person, which is, of course, why Trump is in trouble in the first place. Amazingly, he would step in the same rat trap over and over again. The reason you're in trouble is the whistle was blown on you because you were busy shopping for dirt on someone you wanted to undermine, and someone caught you doing that, and your reaction to that is, I will now shop for dirt on that person. I mean, I guess that goes directly, well, to a lot of things, but among many of them, it goes directly to what Byron York's defense was and why Byron York's defense of Trump was so stupid. Oh, he would never be so dumb as to do this particular thing, knowing he would get caught. Well, now he knows. I mean, if you don't know that as president, all eyes are on you, that's very dumb. If you don't know that as president, while all eyes were on you, they caught you doing something impeachable, and they will now begin looking at you even more closely, and then you do the same thing again, that also is extraordinarily dumb. And yet here it is happening, and I don't know how you deny it at this point. There's no I have no response to that. The idea that Trump wouldn't do this thing because it would obviously get you in trouble, and I'm watching him do it in real time on Twitter. But I guess his big complaint here is, we left off by saying, well, okay, why the whistleblower's testimony would be demanded by Republicans. The whole thing started by this report being filed. Obviously, you've got to hear from the whistleblower. There are, of course, small problems with that, like you're supposed to protect the whistleblower's identity by law, and so releasing that name or even having that person testify poses certain problems. Not insurmountable problems. Might even be things that you can say, well, it's best for our case if the person does in fact testify. But as Republicans complained almost immediately, well, they weren't listening on the call. They only have secondhand knowledge of this stuff. They were told allegedly by people who were on the call that there was this problem, and then this person filed the report. And by the way, I guess you could stop and ask from the other side of the equation, why is it that the people who were so upset that they told this whistleblower about the horrible things that happened on this call, why didn't they file those reports? And I guess some of them eventually did, in fact, file those reports. But why this other person was able to beat them to the punch with the reports, I really don't know. But that's the way it happened. But you remember that the first complaint was, well, that's hearsay, and so you can't value the report. And of course, having that person testify doesn't cure it as hearsay by itself, and that one of the more I don't know what we say, esoteric legal points that would go along with this. But, their demands are incoherent because they're lashing out at anything they've got. Well, who filed the report? The whistleblower, and we're protecting their identity at this point. Well, they didn't even hear the call. It's hearsay. Okay, fine. Then it's hearsay. Well, then we demand that they testify. Well, why would we have them testify if all they have to say is hearsay and you won't admit it? And the answer to that one is because we want the scene of us objecting to it being hearsay. It won't happen because it's not happening in a court of law, but we would want to be able to make that objection in whatever hearings there are, and then everyone would see that objection being made. And we know that from watching crime dramas on television, Americans understand when you say objection, hearsay, and then they rule and they uphold the objection and the testimony isn't allowed. Well, if the testimony isn't allowed, then what have they got? They've got nothing. You see, well, unfortunately for you, what they do have is firsthand testimony, which does beat the hearsay objection and is better, clearer, and more direct evidence of wrongdoing. And that's why they've been interviewing those people. That's why Vindman has been there, why Fiona Hill has been there. Fiona Hill is apparently back on the Hill today, as reported by Andrew Desiderio, who says that she's back at the Capitol, likely to review the transcript of her testimony, and I guess make sure that there aren't any corrections or misrepresentations in the transcript that she thinks ought to be noted or corrected. But so all of those people were brought forward precisely because the whistleblower's testimony isn't particularly valuable all by itself. That's why all these other witnesses were called, to bolster the story and to double check the story told by the whistleblower. And now the spin from Republicans is, well, the whistleblower is central to everything, and if the whistleblower won't testify, then you have no case, when the better case was other people's testimony all along. All they really wanted was to get the whistleblower there so that they could identify that person, run the same play, run the same trick, and then try and smear that person. You can tell that is the Republican, or at least the Trump play that they have in mind, because one, that's been the play they run on everybody, and two, they just tried to spend the weekend smearing Vindman. I saw video clips of Trump being circulated, and I have to say, I thought the reporters who were circulating the clip took a even more alarmist view about it than I would have taken in reading it, saying, tweeting it out with I guess what we'll call the headline, because it really was just the tweet describing the video, saying Trump is threatening to release dirt on Vindman. And people then saying, well, that's witness intimidation. And it is. It would be if that was exactly what he meant. I thought Trump was a little more vague than that, and maybe strategically so. Maybe that he really does intend to intimidate Vindman and just was, for some reason, all of a sudden being somewhat more careful than usual. But he was just saying, well, we have information about him that might, undermine the case, I guess, that he's making, which is that he's a never Trumper. And immediately people go, oh, you're trying to smear him. Well, I don't think that's really a smear. I think that's good news if you're a never Trumper. And what difference does it make? The fact that a witness doesn't want to vote for a particular political candidate, even if it's the political candidate in question who's the central suspect in the case, that you can weigh that, I guess, as a juror, but it doesn't undermine his testimony in any serious way, unless it's just perjury, in which case you have him on that. His political preference shouldn't be of any interest. But anyway, everybody else interpreted it as threatening Vindman with something, although what the punishment for being a never Trumper is, I have no idea. Anyway, I just thought this whole, what Trump has spent his whole weekend on, trying to get a hold of the name of the whistleblower so that you can say, well, I heard, the whistleblower is the fifth dentist who doesn't recommend sugarless gum for his patients who chew gum. That's the devil we've been after this whole time. I assume that they have better dirt on that and are trying to, or are ready to try to manufacture better dirt than that. But I think that's all that they're after in trying to get the name. Let's say, Mike, you think so too? Or what do you think that's interesting? Mike Musson says, interesting logic. So Trump should also testify in person. Yes, written answer is not acceptable. Yes, you're referring back to where we started with this. Sam Stein, in responding to Trump saying the whistleblower gave false information and has to be brought forward to testify. The whistleblower's lawyers have said, well, I'll tell you what, since we're trying to protect the whistleblower's identity, we will respond to any written questions you would like to submit under penalty of perjury, just like with everything else, and answer your questions that way, as opposed to direct live testimony, which carries with it the risk of exposure. Keeping in mind here, Republican members of the three committees doing these joint sessions for depositions have been extraordinarily active in trying to, as we described last week, plant the name of the people that they suspect are the whistleblower in the transcripts so that they either will be able to release the name when they release the transcript, or failing that, will redact the name of the whistleblower in the transcript and then point to redactions and say, see, the Democrats who run this committee are not being forthcoming with the information they have. They're hiding the ball. They're hiding secrets from you. Why the secrecy if you think you have the right case? And that will register with a certain number of people, and they're dumb people, but it will register with them, and they'll have that. So, anyway, so the lawyer for the whistleblower, lawyers say, just submit your questions in writing, we'll answer in writing. And Trump, because this will not identify the whistleblower, says this is now unacceptable. You can't just do written, he says it right here in his tweet, written answer is not acceptable, he writes, which is hilarious in its own right. And as Mike points out here, Trump, of course, answered Mueller's questions in writing, refusing to allow them to question him live and in person. Now that is no longer an acceptable standard. That's what Sam Stein is saying. So Mike and Sam are on the same page on that one. And it will make no difference, of course, to Trump. He won't acknowledge the contradiction. And that's that, I guess. Let's see. Scrolling back down a little bit further in the Twitter stream and responding to more of Trump's yelling over the weekend. Let's see. Another of his favorite tropes was he came up with the idea that he would read the transcript, which isn't a transcript, to us all in a fireside chat with or without voices. I don't know. Lots of people thought it would be a great idea for him to try to read this thing and see if he tries to do a Ukrainian accent or not in reading Zelensky's part. But this was kind of interesting, too. There's a confessional element to what Trump had to say. What is this entire tweet is, and I guess it's a thread now. If Shifty Adam Schiff, who is a corrupt politician who fraudulently made up what I said on the quote call, which I don't know why you would put in scare quotes, it was a call, right? If Schiff is allowed to release transcripts of the Never Trumpers and others that were interviewed, he will change the words that were said to suit the Dems' purposes. Isn't that interesting? As an accusation that if Schiff releases the transcript of the call, or for of other things, or of other people's recollections of the call, like Vindman's, he's going to change the words. Schiff would change the wording in order to make it more incriminating, which is, of course, one, what is actually happening with the non-transcript transcript. Vindman has already told us that he does not agree that that document accurately reflects the entirety of the conversation between Trump and Zelensky, and that words were changed and eliminated. But again, projection comes into play. what is happening here is Trump is telling us what he planned to do with the fake transcript and fireside chat, against almost universal advice to the contrary. Trump says he insists that he thinks reading this thing aloud would be a good idea. And I think maybe the reason he thinks it's a good idea is he's right now in this tweet here pre-confessing to what we all figured he would be doing with this thing, changing the words and just claiming that those were them. See, I read from the transcript. That would be a lie. But it would go out over the radio that I read you the transcript word for word and you heard it and it sounded pretty good, right? So I must not be guilty. And then we'd go through a cycle and a half, news cycle and a half, which is about 5 minutes now, fighting over whether or not he really read it. And we could all follow along on the transcripts that we got out of the newspaper, and we would see the differences in real time as he was reading it. That would still not be enough to convince most people who are a part of his base that he's done anything wrong here. That he read it a little bit wrong. That too, that actually reminds me of another story that sort of developed over the weekend as well. I'm trying to think about whether or not I should deal with that story or another one first. Here's what I'm going to do. Maybe I'll save this story and make myself a note about it, but it reminded me of everybody was discussing over the weekend a relatively recent Ashley Feinberg. Do I have it right? Ashley Feinberg's story about Trump and his eyesight. This was sort of an interesting bit. Maybe I ought to do this one before we head out here. Let me scroll back down. Still looking. I haven't even gotten to my pocket stuff yet, which I'll perhaps save for later on. But I got to find this thing because I was surprised about how many people seem to sort of just be coming to this realization that Trump's poor eyesight, A, was a thing, and B, could explain a lot of his otherwise inexplicable behavior. I thought that was kind of interesting too. But a lot of people, what didn't surprise me is that there were a lot of people pointing to this one particular piece in which the eyesight was central to the story of his behavior. Let me see if I can't find this thing. I know it's around here somewhere. I thought I feel like we had made an issue of it ourselves for quite some time, but and I know I had some tweets running back a couple of years about this too. But where is the citation to the Feinberg story? I wish it was more readily available. Here we are. Southpaw, NYC Southpaw, pointing out, here we are, President Trump's vision is deeply impaired and he refuses to wear corrective lenses in the presence of other people. New York Times casually reports halfway down a long feature about his Twitter use. Let me grab just the New York Times story so we can get the headline on that one. This would be, it was one of those interactive pieces, so who knows what the headline is. I have no idea what this runs back to here. How unhelpful is that? Okay, well, anyway, it's the New York Times, the Twitter presidency interactive feature. Oh, okay. And, why doesn't this lead to a printed report? I don't know, but Southpaw has grabbed this section of it that says, once Mr. Trump arrives in the West Wing, usually after 10 a.m., Dan Scavino, the White House social media director, takes control of the Twitter account, tweeting as real Donald Trump from his own phone or computer. Mr. Trump rarely tweets in front of others, those close to him say, because he does not like to wear the reading glasses he needs to see the screen. That's a very interesting little grab. And then, of course, other people were more interested in what comes in the next paragraph here. Instead, the president dictates tweets to Mr. Scavino, who sits in a closet-sized room, that's funny, just off the Oval Office until Mr. Trump calls out, Scavino! Often he prints out suggested tweets in extra-large fonts for the president to sign off on. A single-page article that Mr. Scavino recently printed out for him ran to 6 pages after the fonts were enlarged, according to one person who saw it. So that tells you a little bit about him and the glasses and the vanity, and Southpaw here pointing that out and then saying, by the way, it's obligatory to say Ashley Feinberg called it, and includes this very interesting article from Slate, Ashley having written it back in August of 2019. Is Donald Trump actually just blind? An investigation. Subheader here says, it would honestly explain a lot, and it sure would, and I think it's stuff that we've noticed along the way. As President Donald Trump addressed the nation about the 2 mass shootings that had occurred over the weekend, he said, "May God bless the memory of those who perished in Toledo." You remember that? The public reacted with alarm and derision. Somehow the president seemed to have moved the Dayton, Ohio massacre to the wrong city, and he'd left out El Paso, Texas entirely. Shortly after his speech, a photograph of the teleprompter proved that the original text had been correct. But more to the point, you can see what's going on or piece it together when you look at the photo of the teleprompter. When Trump messes up this way, Ashley continues, people tend to blame his mental condition. That's got to be part of it. With advanced age and the stress of his job, the theory goes, the president finds it ever more difficult to organize his erratic thoughts. He loses focus and lapses into incoherence. But what if Trump's problem was a literal lack of focus? Literal lack of focus. What if, where most people saw the words Texas and Ohio, think about them, Texas and Ohio on the teleprompter, the president saw a capital T, a big blur, and maybe an O somewhere? Minor city in Ohio, starts with T, because that's what's on the screen, Toledo. Right? And I guess when you see the photo, you think, that could be it. Now, she continues here. In 2014, as Donald Trump took the stand to testify in a civil case brought against him by 2 would-be residents, had his tower in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, ever actually opened, he asked the judge presiding over the case if he could borrow the judge's reading glasses. According to a photo caption in the Sun Sentinel at the time, Trump quipped that he should wear them all the time, but he's too vain. Available evidence would seem to agree. There are few recorded instances of Trump actually wearing glasses, but many of the ones that do exist appear to have been taken when Trump thought no one could see. And the first one offered up here is Trump wearing glasses as he departs in the limo from Trump National Golf Club, October 22nd, 2017, the one in Virginia. I've seen it. I've seen a few others, and he has, pretty serious, thick lensed glasses that he's got to wear when he thinks no one can see him, and he's got them on. Just this past February, in a speech to various assembled governors during a White House business session, and that's enclosed in quotes there, Trump took some time to mock Chinese President Xi Jinping's aides, not the president himself, but the aides to Xi Jinping, for wearing glasses. And there's some video included here, and he's got, he's making like round goggly eye, hand gestures, which are barely visible, over his puffy chameleon eyes here. Now, the mention of glasses paired with the central casting comment that he always likes to throw out. How long does this video run? I'm just kind of curious. 18 seconds, eh? Well, because I could bump up the volume on this thing here and see if I can play 18 seconds worth of video for you and get the audio behind it, right?
And I said, Mr. President, could you do me a favor? Could you let the 3 basketball players out? He didn't know about it. He called over his people. He's got 10 people standing behind him. Everyone is central casting. Glasses, pad. Boom. He was over it. He came back.
All right, so you get the idea here. This not necessarily, I guess there's not much more to it anyway. But so central casting, that's what we're talking about. The mention of glasses paired with the central casting comment, and listen to the laughter, indicates that Trump was making a racist joke about playing on an outdated Asian stereotype as exemplified by Mickey Rooney's character in Breakfast at Tiffany's. But the fact that Trump locked on the glasses specifically points to at least some degree of preoccupation with corrective lenses, and I guess how it makes you look when you've got to wear them. Might this all be because Trump himself is in desperate need of glasses? How much of the president's erratic behavior could be simply because he prefers to be blind than to display any sort of weakness? The question of Trump's ocular health isn't an entirely new one. In July of 2016, an ophthalmologist told Vice that Trump's constant squinting, definitely have noticed that, could be him trying to compensate for some blurry vision or perhaps chronic dry eye. And as someone who's been told I can never wear contacts due to insufficiently productive tear ducts, I can sympathize with both. Could be. Let me conclude after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue with the Ashley Feinberg piece here from Salon. I thought it was very insightful. I only wish that as many people had seen my tweets all along about this stuff as with her article. But she's got a pretty big following, me included, and that's because she puts things very well and uniquely and with coherent, organized thought as opposed to my occasional tweets. But I guess I was surprised that more people hadn't seen this all along, but maybe you're all compensating by refusing to wear corrective lenses. I don't know. Anyway, where Ashley left off here was maybe it's I can't wear contact lenses, and that makes me mad. I would ordinarily do that. But but still, to get to the conclusion that it's more important to me to look a certain way, and consider that he hasn't looked his, you know how he is. He's frozen in the 80s, even with his own impression of himself. I don't think, maybe he won't wear glasses because then he'll look in the mirror and see what he really looks like now. That's a possibility. But he has this idea of himself as, being the dashing billionaire boy, and doesn't want to do anything to admit that that's no longer the case. Anyway, we'll continue with this here. Based on the available evidence, and by Donald Trump's own admission, it's safe to assume that, like me, our president also walks around in a world made almost entirely of blurs and soft-edged shapes. And in fact, it would explain quite a lot. Consider the teleprompter question again. Here's Barack Obama's teleprompter from 2009. Just sort of a random picture, and it's just one of those things that you don't usually take a picture of. But here it is. The teleprompter used by Barack Obama shows thinner, slightly smaller text than that used by Donald Trump. And you can tell by putting them side by side. Here's Trump's teleprompter, not only considerably larger in size, but displaying a much, much larger font. You'll see it yourself when you take a look at the linked article. But let's see. Obama's, not to mention the quality of the speech text, but Obama's has displayed on it the words, "We have already seen a jump in refinancing of mortgages as homeowners take advantage of lower rates, and every something, something, something." So it's a smaller screen to start with, and smaller type. Smaller type, smaller screen, more text on a screen. And you've perhaps noticed in Trump's speech deliveries also that there are weird pauses, that don't belong there. And I think that's them they have to scroll the text along with him just a little bit ahead of where he's reading. And, he departs from his text so often with those dumb comments. And I think they might be filler while he's waiting for the text to move up where he'll say, so true, or something like that. He's waiting for that, unskilled operators to move more text onto the screen. But with big, clunky text like that, it takes some skill to try to get it on there correctly. The picture of Trump's teleprompter here from his speech during the swearing-in ceremony for Brett Kavanaugh fits this much text on there in giant type. I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering. That's all you can. That's how much you can put on a screen at any one time. And if he gets the word wrong, do you scroll backwards so that he can see it and correct, or say and? They told me that I was going to build a giant face between us and Mexico, and a fence. A face and a fence. It's very difficult for him to get the opportunity to correct. And so you'll also hear those weird pauses. So, for instance, he might have delivered this speech. I want to apologize to Brett and the entire Kavanaugh family for the terrible pain and suffering that have been caused by, so these weird breaks in sentences that don't belong. When you've got type that is that big, it's very hard to flow smoothly on a teleprompter. All right, the screen itself, as she notes, is significantly larger, and the font appears to be a few notches bigger, too. It's the sort of adjustment the White House might make for a president with poor eyesight. It's a legit thing to do, actually, but if that president also refuses to wear corrective lenses, there's only so much a teleprompter can do. Another curiosity at the Trump presidency, and of the presidency, just do it his way, has been his approach to stairs. And now a lot of you have noticed that, I know. Almost every time he exits Air Force One, Trump can be spotted white-knuckling the guardrail as he stares intently at his feet. And in 2017, the Times of London reported that widely mocked photo in which Trump grabbed Theresa May's hand. And that was due explicitly to his fear of stairs, is what the Times of London was reporting. This could be explained away by the fact that our president is 73 years old and his balance almost certainly isn't what it once was. But Donald Trump has been hostile toward adept stair users since at least 2014. And a embedded tweet here from 2014, Trump saying of Obama, "The way President Obama runs down the stairs of Air Force One, hopping and bobbing all the way, is so inelegant and unpresidential. Do not fall!" Exclamation point. So a little bit more projection there? I think so. A man with poor eyesight and perhaps poor depth perception, however, would indeed be far more cautious around stairs than most. And a man terrified of embarrassing himself in any capacity, doubly so, although I have my doubts about that. He seems fairly competent anywhere, fairly frequent that he embarrasses himself. He just doesn't acknowledge it. Even more bizarre, in January 2017, Trump appeared not to recognize his dear friend and then cybersecurity advisor, Rudy Giuliani, who was sitting directly in front of him. Another 16 seconds of tape here. Do we want to bring that volume up? And do you remember this one? Let's see if we can't play this pretty quickly. Oh, let's get more volume.
To him and to what he does, and maybe I'll ask Rudy to say a few words.
Well, thank you very, very much, Mr. President. First of all, congratulations on what is in fact a historic start of an administration.
I'll just stop it there because it doesn't matter what Rudy Giuliani is actually saying there. But if you see the video, and you can take a look at it for yourself later on, where he's saying, "Where is Rudy? Where is Rudy?" And Rudy is there at the cabinet table, in the cabinet room. They're at the table. Giuliani, in the shot, eventually when they pan back a little bit, is sitting directly in front of Trump's face. But he's got those puffy chameleon eyes, and he's, looking around. Where's Rudy? He's looking behind him. He's looking to his left and right. Directly in front of you, sir. Right in front. And I mean, the cabinet table is a big one. Remember, he doesn't sit at the end of the table. He sits right in the middle. So I would say that there's perhaps 6 feet between, maybe 8. I don't know how wide that table is. But I would say 6 to 8 feet between their faces. And where is Rudy? I can't find him. Remember also, there are even closer to him are name tags. They put out the Rudy Giuliani's name tag directly in front of him, even though he would know who he is if he saw his face, but he can't see his face. So there's and those are as much for the press as for everybody else. But even when he finally is told that Giuliani is in front of him and hones in on his voice, you can just see that his eyes, there's no way he's focused. He's completely vacuous eyes there. He doesn't know what he's looking at. He comes to grasp the fact that that voice is coming from directly in front of me. So that must be Rudy Giuliani or a speaker playing his voice. Anyway, I'll just look in that direction. There's never, no focus the way there is on the people immediately to his left and right. And what is that? John Kelly and Jared Kushner, who can both see Giuliani and is looking right. Now there's another one as well that she brings up. We'll just continue with her reporting. At the time, the most likely explanation seemed to be senile degeneration. But again, the simpler explanation would be that Trump just genuinely did not see him because he couldn't. This, too, would explain Trump's aggressively large signature and his insistence that all information fed to him include as many pictures and as few words as humanly possible. I think that's right. We've heard that report, obviously. But that could be a reason. It also might explain one of the most chilling lines ever published about Melania Trump. I don't know if it's really all that chilling, but it's this one. According to a pool report, President Trump responded by pointing to a window in the White House residence when he was speaking from outside. Remember this one? And said, "She's doing great. She's looking at us right there." Reporters turned to look at the spot he indicated, but there was no sign of the First Lady. You remember what that was and when it was happening? This was May 25th, 2018. Washington Post report here. Trump says the First Lady is, quote, "doing great. She hasn't been seen in public for 2 weeks." You remember that? And I'll prove that she's fine. She's right there in that window. She's looking at us right now. And what we found out was, well, no, she isn't. Sure, Ashley says it wouldn't be out of character for the president to tell a brazen, immediately disprovable lie. But when your family only exists to you as a series of vague, oval-like shaped in various shades of beige, anything could be Melania, even an empty window. All explained by poor vision. I was going to say there was another such incident with the eyesight at the table, which was something that I had noticed, and I guess I was retweeting it along with the various other people's observations, or pointing to Ashley Feinberg's compilation of all these stories. But I recall that there was an incident in which he was sitting at the cabinet table and is looking around at people. Oh, I remember. Well, he was photographed with a seating chart in front of him. Now, everybody had name tags, like we said, in front of them around the cabinet table. So why would he, I was wondering, why would he need the seating chart if there were name tags everywhere? Because the suggestion was, this is, again, they were talking about his mental faculties. He doesn't know everybody at the table. And that could easily be the case at any presidential meeting. Lots of people that you're not necessarily familiar with are herded in there for various reasons. So was the seating chart to remind him who all those people were? No. In this case, all the people in there were familiar to him, or likely familiar to him, but the seating chart was given to him because his eyes are so poor that he can't read even the giant name tags put in front of everybody. I mean, think about what it means if you can't even pick out Rudy Giuliani's face directly across from you. So they give him something to look down on and be able to tell who's who that way instead. I think she's dead on here. So the surprise isn't that she's discovered this. It's the surprise to me is that other people have not picked up on his inability to see. I just even think just from his Saturday, well, what were originally Saturday radio addresses, which for some reason he has added video to, and pick any one you want. He's squinting wildly, whether he's indoors or outdoors. He's squinting like crazy to try to read the giant type on his gigantic teleprompter. And it's embarrassing. I don't really know why they continue to produce this product. Anyway, Ashley concludes by saying, if you spent your days unable to see, constantly unsure of what you were doing and to whom you were speaking, wouldn't you be agitated too? Wouldn't you also probably resent being asked about details about anything, right? And wouldn't all of this result in a general state of surliness and short-temperedness? There's no question that our president's brain is broken and that his mental acuity isn't anywhere near what it once was, but perhaps it all isn't quite as bad as we thought. Perhaps Donald Trump just needs to wear his goddamn glasses. Okay. Well, there you go. So that's pretty amazing as well. Oh, and a little corrective note here at the bottom. Not corrective lenses, but a note at the bottom that says, this post originally misstated that Mickey Rooney's stereotypical character in Breakfast at Tiffany's was Chinese, but he was meant to be Japanese. And so there you go. We got the wrong racism in the original report, but I guess it's since been corrected. So whatever we read was likely already corrected. Okay. Yeah, Mike Musson, I think, agreeing here. Funny, that would explain why he would play golf so much and or the way he plays, and it explains the constant cheating. For one thing, it may be that when his caddy goes up ahead and kicks his ball back into the fairway, he genuinely doesn't know that that's been done because he never saw it. Or two, he'll hit the ball and people with decent eyesight say, not just sliced into the woods, but instead, he'll drive up there, I guess when he cheats on his own, and says, I guess I can't find my ball, but I figure it probably would have, I'm going to drop right about here, and everybody saw you slice it into the woods 50 yards back. But generally speaking, I hit it really nice and straight. I'll just drop it here at about 270. All right. Let's see. Other things that I'm trying to find my way through the priorities I had, but I know that just discussing all this stuff over the weekend, there were so many interesting things flying by via Twitter that, but they just don't present a coherent narrative. I might have to just jump back into Pocket and get the more serious stories filed away here and get them in front of you. All right, let's see. There's a couple of here's one that Greg wanted to share and thought would be a good idea to bring forward here, from Will Bunch. And let's see, I also wanted to get to a couple of these other rather more amazing ones. All right, I think we can probably figure things out from here. Let's see. The Will Bunch piece was kind of interesting, and I guess in the context of the people coming back to or scheduled for depositions before the committees this week. And I think that's so buried now under the torrent of information that came forward toward the end of last week and into the weekend. There are so many people scheduled to testify, and many of them, I think Greg noted, are just going to be the no-shows. So that may be, they just double booked everybody and figured half of them aren't going to show up. But also, I think those who do show up may spend considerably less time with the committee, not because they have less to say, but because the questions or the answers being sought, I think, are an awful lot more focused at this point. Yeah. All right. Well, at any rate, let's see. Will Bunch's piece here from the Philly Inquirer. Get the emails. This will bring us up to speed on stuff that we haven't spent enough time on, but I think that is critical. This was the big talk of the weekend, most of which resulted from Jason Leopold's FOIA quest we made mention of a different aspect, I think, of his FOIA quest on the show that we taped for Friday. I think it was Friday. And it may have happened earlier in the week that we discussed it, but his FOIA quest for the various Mueller materials, including, I now remember mentioning the 302s, the reports on interviews conducted by the FBI, and people sifted through them over the weekend. Yeah, I think on Friday the story was just the fact that they had finally been produced and how we got a hold of them, and initial surface impressions of what we found in the first few minutes. And over the weekend, more and more information getting squeezed out as people gave it a closer and closer reading. A big takeaway from the weekend, too, was people expressing their extraordinary, and I think correct, disappointment with the results of Mueller's work. I mean, I guess everybody we had so much riding on it. And it's interesting now thinking back on how many people said, God, the Mueller report is so damning, it's unbelievable that Congress isn't ready to move forward with impeachment although it was dumb that they said we ought to wait for the Mueller report. It was a strategic error to say that they were putting so much on it. But I understood why they were doing it. I just thought it was a mistake. But then when the report came out, everybody thought it was so damning. And it was. I mean, it really was. There's not to take anything away from what's actually in it. But what's not in it is A, even more damning, and B, inexplicable in terms of the decision by Mueller not to pursue this further and highlight it more, although other people were offering up the excuse that, remember, at the very end of the process, there was the opportunity for Bill Barr to, A, be appointed Attorney General, and then B, step in and use his position at the top of the heap of the Justice Department to come down on Mueller's ability to spill more beans and to limit the scope of what would be permissible in the report, et cetera, et cetera. And that, that's entirely possible. But a lot of other people just sort of speculating, Mueller sort of seems to have lost his nerve in a way on this and really produced a much milder report than he could have, but it still was pretty damning. All right, well, let me get to Will Bunch's summary of things here. Rick Gates, the veteran high-level political operative who served as Donald Trump's deputy campaign manager in 2016, told investigators he remembers exactly where he was, aboard Trump's campaign jet, when he heard the candidate's desires and frustrations over a scheme to defeat Hillary Clinton with hacked, stolen emails boil over. And he also remembered the future president's exact words that day in summer of 2016, "Get the emails." These coming from the notes on interviews conducted by Mueller's investigators dislodged by Jason Leopold's FOIA lawsuit. In one sense, Gates' confirmation of Trump's obsession with a conspiracy theory that 33,000 of his Democratic rivals' emails had been stolen and could reveal damning information isn't a total shock. After all, the 2016 candidate famously blurted the quiet part out loud during a public appearance in that July when he famously said, "Russia, if you're listening." Everyone remembers that one. By the way, Byron York, you would do well to remember that yourself. But in another sense, Saturday's disclosure, part of 500 pages of previously secret documents from Special Counsel Robert Mueller's probe of the Trump-Russia scandal, revealed because of a dogged Freedom of Information push, was a bit shocking. Gates' disclosure to investigators was a key insight into the state of mind of a campaign that was willing and eager to work with electronic thieves, even with powerful foreign adversaries like Russia, if need be, to win a presidential election. Yet that critical information wasn't revealed in Mueller's 440-page report that was supposed to tell the American public everything we needed to know about what the president knew and when he knew it regarding Russia's election hacking. And, I guess it didn't. I got to skip the embedded tweets here. Indeed, The 500 pages, including agents' interviews with key players like Gates, Trump's now disgraced former lawyer Michael Cohen, and former top aide Steve Bannon, could be well described as the Mueller probe you've never seen it before. Like no one has ever seen it before, right? Among the revelations are that Gates said that a lot of the pressure to find the purloined emails fell on retired General Michael Flynn, soon to be Trump's short-lived national security advisor, because Flynn had the most Russia contacts of anyone on the campaign. The number 2 man on Trump's 2016 campaign also gave agents some interesting leads on the wooing of WikiLeaks, the intermediary that did release some stolen Democratic emails and documents, and his belief that the Republican National Committee had advanced knowledge of WikiLeaks dumps. Other revelations from the 500 pages of source material are confirmation that Paul Manafort, now in prison for tax evasion and other crimes, continued to advise the Trump campaign long after his official ouster as campaign chief that summer, in a move tied to revelations of his close links to pro-Russian Ukrainians. More importantly, the papers show that Manafort was also working as far back as 2016 to plant the seeds in the collective minds of Team Trump that perhaps Ukrainians, and thus not Russia, were behind all the hacking. Again, we finally begin to see where his delusions exactly came from. Manafort's weird, unfounded theory, also prompted by his longtime associate Konstantin Kilimnik, whom the Mueller probe tied to Russian intelligence, would prove to have enormous consequences for the United States as its 45th president. Trump's obsession with proving Manafort's idea prompted 2019's indecent proposal to new Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky that even GOP senators are now conceding was a quid pro quo, the scandal that led to Friday's historic House vote, making impeachment seemingly inevitable. And I think it was Thursday. But okay. The disclosures also bring into much sharper focus something that's critical for understanding America's current plight, the so-called Trump-Russia scandal, in which the president falsely claimed total exoneration after Mueller's muddled 2-year probe, and the so-called Ukraine scandal, which now imperils the White House, is really just one giant scandal. Yes, hello. It's a power-hungry demagogue seeking the ego boost and enriching brand-building potential of the American presidency, having no moral qualms about trying to work with criminals in 2016, or abusing the power of his office, now in 2019, to get what he wanted, even relying on the same shady cast of characters in both occasions. Saturday's news about the Mueller memos didn't cause a huge stir. Most on social media were more taken by the schadenfreude of seeing Trump's narcissistic 2019 world approval-seeking tour drawing more boos in Madison Square Garden. Yet it tells us 3 very important things. First, and not to be forgotten, is the role of BuzzFeed journalist Jason Leopold, as well as CNN, in relentlessly pushing to gain this information through the Freedom of Information laws. In a time when the White House has proclaimed journalists as the enemy of the people, Leopold and CNN remind us that the First Amendment is more vital and important than ever. But there's a more discouraging takeaway. Are you ready to be more discouraged? The powerful suggestion that the Mueller investigation that dominated the news for a better part of 2 years was never what the millions of Americans who believed in the battle-tested former FBI chief, a functioning justice system, and the truth actually thought it was. Saturday's revealing memos were just the latest and strongest hint that an investigation upon which too many pinned too much hope, from Mueller Time t-shirts to Mueller's Got This, Come to Bed cartoons in the New Yorker, was in fact the gaslighting of America on a massive scale, even for the Trump era. Sorry, hon, Mueller didn't get this. It's hard to know how much of this is the fault of Mueller, the taciturn Vietnam War hero, who may not have temperamentally been up to the job of grasping such a vast threat to American democracy under the best of circumstances. And these clearly were not the best of circumstances. When Mueller finally testified in public before Congress and appeared hesitant and hazy about his own investigation, is that right? It seemed clear that a probe conducted strictly behind closed doors for 2 years may not have been what people thought it was. There were, in hindsight, clearly clues. Why were Trump figures, including Gates, Flynn, and others, given relatively sweet deals to plead guilty and provide information, when that information didn't bring consequences for the president and other higher-ups around him? A warning flag was Team Mueller's surprisingly public denial of a BuzzFeed article about Trump pressure on Cohen to mislead Congress, when Saturday's memos suggest there was in fact Trump pressure on Cohen to mislead Congress. Why was Mueller so willing to punt the substantial evidence on obstruction of justice to Congress, ducking any forceful recommendations on what to do with it? Maybe that's because in the end, a probe was 50% about obstruction of justice. Was thwarted by yet more obstruction of justice. Yeah, well, that could all be the case, and the big conclusion of the piece we'll have to wait on or let you read for yourselves. Time now for us to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for his roundup of the news. Just wanted to at least get that on record since so much of the weekend conversation was about that. Back on track Tuesday with more, plus a report from our good friend Eric in Orlando, reminding us of our duties in the upcoming elections, some of which are taking place tomorrow. Tomorrow makes a good day for that reminder. And stay tuned. Keep your fake
From
radio
Daily
right here.
Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
All right, more about that whistleblower and the refusal of the Republicans to accept their written testimony. Let's see. The neo-fascist Proud Boys filing papers for the GOP nomination. One of the, the head of these kooks now getting ready to run, for Congress against an incumbent Democrat.